Captain Park Miho's hands were locked in heavy metal chains as two alien guards dragged him through the prison ship's dark corridors. His face was bruised and cut, but his eyes stayed sharp and alert. He counted every turn, memorized every door, and watched everything around him. The guards were huge reptilian creatures with red scales and cold yellow eyes. They spoke in hissing voices that his translator collar barely converted into words he could understand. They were called Zytherians, and they controlled this entire sector of space with fear and violence. "Keep moving, human," one guard growled, shoving Miho forward. Through the transparent walls on both sides, Miho saw dozens of prison cells. Each one held a different kind of monster. In one cell, a massive creature with 8 legs and venomous spikes scratched against the barriers. In another, something made of living shadow pressed against the glass with what might have been faces. Screams and roars echoed from somewhere deeper in the ship. This wasn't just a prison. It was a collection of nightmares. They stopped in front of a massive circular door with warning symbols painted in alien languages. Beyond it, Miho heard something breathing. Something big. The sound was deep and rhythmic, like a sleeping volcano. A voice boomed from speakers above. "Human designated as Park Miho. You have been found guilty of trespassing in Coalition space and stealing from military supply routes. Your sentence is death by combat in the Dragon Pits." Miho looked up at the viewing platform where a tall alien commander stood watching. The commander's scales were darker than the guards, almost black, and his eyes glowed with cruel intelligence. "The Draconis have not eaten in 3 days," the commander continued. "They will be very hungry. You should feel honored. Your death will entertain many important guests today." More aliens began gathering at the viewing windows. Some carried drinks. Others placed bets on how long Miho would survive. Most of them were laughing. The guards stripped away Miho's chains but left the translator collar. "We want you to be able to scream properly," one guard said with a horrible grin. The massive door began to open with a grinding sound of metal on metal. Heat and the smell of sulfur poured out. Miho's eyes adjusted to the dim red light inside. The pit was enormous, at least 50 meters across with walls too smooth to climb. The floor was covered in sand, rocks, and scattered white bones. Human bones. Alien bones. Bones from creatures Miho couldn't even identify. Then he saw them. 3 dragons emerged from caves carved into the pit walls. Each one was over 6 meters long with scales that looked like black iron. Their claws scraped against stone as they moved. Smoke drifted from their nostrils with each breath. Their eyes glowed like hot coals in the darkness. These weren't mindless beasts. Miho could see intelligence in the way they moved. They spread out immediately, surrounding him in a practiced hunting formation. The largest dragon, its back covered in old scars from countless fights, took the center position. The other 2 moved to flank it, cutting off any possible escape. The guards shoved Miho inside and the door slammed shut behind him with a sound like thunder. Miho stood perfectly still. His heart pounded in his chest but he controlled his breathing. Panic meant death. Fear meant death. He needed to think. The aliens pressed against the viewing windows above, waiting for the show to begin. The scarred dragon lowered its head and sniffed the air. Its lips pulled back, revealing teeth as long as daggers. Deep in its throat, a glow began to build. Fire. The other 2 dragons shifted their weight, muscles tensing beneath their scales. They were ready to strike from 3 directions at once. Miho slowly reached down and picked up a long bone from the ground. It was thick and heavy with one end broken into a sharp point. Not much of a weapon against 3 dragons, but it was better than nothing. The scarred dragon's eyes locked onto Miho. Its mouth opened wider, showing rows of serrated teeth designed to tear flesh from bone. The dragon lunged forward with explosive speed. And Miho moved. Miho didn't run backward. He ran forward. The dragon's jaws snapped shut on empty air as Miho dropped and rolled directly under its belly. The creature's momentum carried it past him, and in that split second, Miho drove the sharp bone upward into the soft flesh behind the dragon's front leg. The dragon screamed. It was a sound of pure rage mixed with something new. Bang. Confusion. No prey had ever heard it before. Miho rolled away as the dragon's tail whipped around, trying to crush him. He came up on his feet, breathing hard, the bloody bone still gripped in his hand. The other 2 dragons froze. Their heads tilted to one side, watching. This small creature had just wounded their leader. Prey didn't do that. Prey ran. Prey died. Above in the viewing area, the alien spectators stopped laughing. The commander leaned forward, his clawed hands pressed against the glass. The scarred dragon turned slowly, favoring its injured leg. Its eyes burned with new intensity as it stared at Miho. Not hunger anymore. Something else. Recognition. For 3 hours the battle continued. Miho used everything in the pit. He climbed on rocks to gain height. He threw sand in the dragon's eyes. He used loose chains hanging from the walls to swing away from their attacks. When one dragon breathed fire, he dove behind boulders and let the flames wash over stone instead of flesh. But he didn't just defend. He attacked. When the second dragon got too close, Miho grabbed a sharp rock and slashed it across the creature's snout. When the third dragon tried to corner him, he used a piece of broken metal to stab at its eye, forcing it back. He was learning their patterns. The way they communicated with small movements of their heads. The way they coordinated their attacks. The slight delay before they could breathe fire again. And slowly something strange began to happen. The dragons started to hesitate. They stopped attacking as a group. They began watching Miho more carefully, with something that looked almost like respect in their burning eyes. By the 6th hour, Miho was exhausted. His clothes were torn and burned. Blood ran from a dozen cuts. But he was still standing. Still fighting. The scarred dragon approached him alone this time. It moved slowly, its massive head lowered. Miho raised his weapon, ready for another attack. But the dragon stopped 3 meters away. It lowered itself onto its belly, still watching Miho with those intelligent eyes. Miho didn't move. His mind raced. What was happening? The dragon made a low rumbling sound in its chest. Not a growl. Something else. The other 2 dragons were watching from the sides, completely still. Miho took a chance. He lowered his weapon slightly but kept it ready. He took 1 step forward. The dragon didn't move. Another step. Still nothing. Then Miho did something that made every alien watching gasp in shock. He reached out his hand and placed it on the dragon's scarred snout. The dragon's eyes closed for a moment. Then it stood up slowly and Miho's hand stayed on its scales. The other 2 dragons approached carefully. They sniffed at Miho, their hot breath washing over him. He didn't flinch. He let them investigate him. After 12 hours, something impossible had happened. The dragons weren't trying to kill Miho anymore. They were circling him protectively. When guards approached the viewing window to check if he was dead, all 3 dragons moved between Miho and the door, growling in warning. The commander's face had gone pale. "This is impossible," he whispered. "No creature has ever tamed a Draconis. They are killers. Pure predators." His assistant spoke quietly. "Commander, the human isn't acting like prey. He's acting like a pack leader. That's ridiculous. Humans are weak. They have no claws, no armor, no natural weapons. Then how is he still alive?" The commander had no answer. He watched as Miho sat down against the wall, exhausted, while the 3 dragons lay in a protective circle around him. For the first time in his career, the commander felt something unfamiliar. Fear. 3 days had passed since Miho entered the dragon pits. The entire prison ship was talking about him. Prisoners in other cells pressed against their barriers to catch glimpses of the human who had tamed 3 dragons. Guards whispered nervously in the hallways. Even other alien species who had been captured showed new expressions when they heard his name. Miho sat in the center of the pit, working on a crude spear. He had collected scraps of metal from the walls and tied them together with strips of leather from his torn clothes. The scarred dragon, which he now called Baram, watched him work with curious eyes. The other 2 dragons, Hanol and Bada, were sleeping nearby. Their massive bodies rose and fell with each breath, and small puffs of smoke drifted from their nostrils. Above in the viewing area, the commander stood with his arms crossed. His name was Velcros and he had run this prison ship for 15 years. Never had he seen anything like this. "Cut their food supply," Velcros ordered. "By half. Hunger will turn them against the human." His assistant hesitated. "Commander, if we anger the dragons they might damage the pit barriers." "Do it," Velcros snapped. "This situation ends now." But when the guards delivered the reduced food portions, something unexpected happened. Miho took his share of the raw meat and split it among the 3 dragons. He ate nothing himself. He simply sat and watched them eat, his hand resting on Baram's neck. The guards reported this back to Velcros. The commander's face darkened with rage. "Send in the combat drones," he ordered. An hour later, 6 mechanical drones dropped into the pit from ceiling hatches. Each one was armed with plasma cannons and spinning blades. They were designed to kill dangerous prisoners without risking guard lives. The drones activated with a humming sound and immediately targeted Miho. But Baram moved first. The dragon's tail swept 2 drones out of the air, smashing them against the wall. Hanol breathed a stream of fire that melted another drone into slag. Bada caught the fourth drone in its jaws and crushed it like paper. The last two drones fired at Miho. He rolled behind Baram, and the plasma bolts bounced harmlessly off the dragon's thick scales. Then Miho whistled, a sharp sound he had been teaching the dragons to recognize. All three dragons breathed fire at once. The remaining drones exploded in balls of flame and twisted metal. The fight was over in less than 30 seconds. Velcro stared in disbelief. The human wasn't just surviving with the dragons. He was commanding them, fighting with them as a coordinated unit. Over the next few days, Miho continued to adapt. He collected shed dragon scales and fashioned them into crude armor for his chest and arms. He discovered that the liquid the dragons used to create fire was stored in glands near their throats. He carefully harvested small amounts from their mouths when they slept, storing it in empty shell casings he found among the bones. He was making weapons, tools. The dragons watched and seemed to understand. At night, when the ship's artificial lights dimmed, Miho would sit with his back against Baram and talk quietly. He spoke about his crew, the people he had lost when Velcro's raiders attacked his ship. He talked about Earth, about mountains and oceans, about his family. The dragons couldn't understand his words, but they responded to his tone. Baram would lower its massive head into Miho's lap. Hanol and Bada would press close on either side, sharing their warmth. Through the walls, other prisoners watched. They began tapping codes on the metal barriers, ancient signals used by captives across the galaxy. Messages passed from cell to cell. The human is strong. The human doesn't break. Maybe the human can free us. In his quarters, Velcro's reviewed security footage again and again. He watched Miho move through the pit with 3 apex predators following his commands. He saw intelligence and strategy in every action. "What are you?" Velcro's whispered to the screen. Then he made his decision. He opened a communication channel to his chief guard. "Prepare the nerve gas. Flood pit 7. Kill everything inside." The guard hesitated. "Sir, the dragons are valuable. They cost millions to capture and transport." "I don't care," Velcro said coldly. "The human is too dangerous to live. Do it tonight." Miho woke to the hissing sound of gas vents opening in the ceiling. His eyes snapped open. He knew that sound. Nerve gas. He jumped to his feet and whistled sharply. All 3 dragons woke instantly, already moving toward him. Yellow mist was pouring down from hidden vents in the pit's ceiling, spreading fast across the floor. Miho's mind raced. The gas was heavier than air, which meant it would fill the pit from bottom to top. But fire created heat. Heat made air rise. If they could create enough updraft, they might push the gas away. "Baram. Anol. Bada." Miho shouted, pointing upward. "Fire. Now." The dragons understood. All 3 lifted their heads and breathed massive streams of flame toward the ceiling. The heat was intense, making the air shimmer and wave. The yellow gas began swirling, caught in the updraft, venting through cracks in the old ceiling panels. Miho tore strips from his remaining clothes and soaked them in water from a drainage pipe. He tied the wet cloth over his mouth and nose. The dragons continued breathing fire in shifts, keeping the updraft going. For 20 minutes they held out. The gas eventually stopped flowing, but Miho knew this was just the beginning. Velcro's would send guards next to confirm they were dead. He was right. 10 minutes later, the main door began to open. 4 guards entered wearing protective masks and carrying plasma rifles. They expected to find bodies. Instead, they found 3 very angry dragons and 1 very prepared human. Miho whistled the attack command. Baram lunged forward and caught the first guard in its jaws. Hanol's tail swept 2 more guards off their feet. Bada breathed fire that melted the 4th guard's weapon before he could fire a shot. Miho ran forward and grabbed a fallen plasma rifle. He had never used alien weapons before, but desperation made him learn fast. He fired twice, both shots hitting their marks. The door was still open. This was his chance. "Come on," Miho shouted, running toward the exit. The dragons followed without hesitation. They burst into the corridor and alarms immediately started screaming throughout the ship. Red emergency lights flashed. Automated voices warned about a containment breach. Other prisoners saw Miho and the dragons running past their cells. They began shouting and banging on their barriers. A Torvin prisoner, a blue-skinned engineer named Kato, called out in broken human language. "Human, free us. We help you." Miho skidded to a stop. He could run alone with the dragons or he could take a bigger risk. He looked at the control panel beside Kato's cell, then at the plasma rifle in his hands. He made his choice. Miho fired at the control panel. Sparks exploded and Kato's cell door opened. The Torvin stumbled out, his eyes wide with disbelief. "You actually did it?" Kato whispered. "Can you open the other cells?" Miho asked. "Yes." "Give me 2 minutes with the main security console." They ran together toward the security station at the end of the corridor. Baram, Hanol, and Bada formed a protective triangle around them. When guards appeared ahead, the dragons dealt with them quickly and brutally. Kato reached the console and his blue fingers flew across the controls. One by one, cell doors throughout the section began opening. Prisoners of dozens of different species poured into the corridors. "Everyone who wants freedom, follow me," Miho shouted. "Everyone else, stay out of our way." About 30 prisoners joined them. They armed themselves with fallen guard weapons and moved as a group toward the ship's main engine room. Velcros watched from the command center, his face twisted with rage. "Seal all corridors. Send every guard. I want that human dead." But it was too late. Miho and his growing army were already cutting through the ship's defenses like a knife through cloth. The dragons were unstoppable in the narrow corridors. Fire and claws and coordinated attacks overwhelmed guard after guard. They reached the engine room and Kato immediately went to work on the controls. Miho stood guard at the door with the dragons beside him. "How long?" Miho asked. 5 minutes to override the safety systems," Kato replied. "Then I can threaten to blow the engines. That will give us leverage." "Do it," Miho said. From down the corridor came the sound of heavy footsteps. Not regular guards this time. Something bigger. Velcros' elite soldiers were coming. Miho checked his plasma rifle's charge. Almost empty. He looked at the dragons and they looked back at him with complete trust in their burning eyes. "One more fight," Miho told them quietly. "Then we're free." The elite guards came in a wave of armor and weapons. 10 of them, each standing over 2 meters tall, carrying heavy plasma cannons. Behind them walked Commander Velcros himself, wearing black combat armor that gleamed under the emergency lights. "Surrender now, human," Velcros called out. "You cannot win this fight." Miho stood his ground with Baram, Hanol, and Bada positioned around him. The other freed prisoners huddled behind them in the engine room. Kato was still working frantically at the controls. "I need 3 more minutes," Kato shouted. "You won't get 3 seconds, Velcros said. He raised his hand and the elite guards opened fire. Plasma bolts filled the corridor. The dragons spread their wings wide, using their armored bodies as shields. The bolts bounced off their scales, leaving scorch marks but no real damage. Miho fired back with his nearly empty rifle, forcing the guards to take cover. "Now!" Miho whistled sharply. All 3 dragons breathed fire simultaneously. The concentrated flames turned the corridor into an inferno. The elite guards had to fall back, their armor glowing red from the heat. But Velcros didn't retreat. He charged forward through the flames, his armor's shields absorbing the fire. He was fast, incredibly fast for something his size. He reached Miho and swung a massive clawed fist. Miho barely dodged, feeling the wind from the blow pass his face. He rolled away and came up with a piece of broken pipe in his hand. "You think you're strong because you tamed some animals?" Velcros hissed. "Humans are weak. No claws. No armor. No natural weapons. You are nothing." "You're right," Miho said, breathing hard. "We don't have claws or armor. That's exactly why we're dangerous." He threw the pipe at Velcros' face. While the commander blocked it, Miho slid between his legs and grabbed an exposed power cable hanging from the damaged wall. He jammed it against Velcros' armor where the shoulder joint connected. Electricity exploded through the commander's systems. His armor locked up, joints frozen by the overload. Velcros roared in rage, trying to break free. "We became the most dangerous creatures on our planet without any natural weapons," Miho said. "We learned to use everything around us. That's what you forgot." He whistled again. Baram's tail swept Velcros' legs out from under him. The commander crashed to the floor, his armor smoking and sparking. "Done," Kato shouted from the engine room. "I have control. The ship's engines are set to overload. I'm broadcasting now." His voice echoed through every speaker on the ship. "Attention all crew. The engines will explode in 10 minutes. This is not a drill. Evacuate to the escape pods immediately or die." Panic spread through the ship instantly. Guards abandoned their posts and ran for the escape pods. Scientists and support staff rushed through corridors. Even the remaining elite guards looked at each other and decided their lives were worth more than capturing prisoners. Velcros lay on the floor, unable to move in his damaged armor. His eyes burned with hatred as he looked up at Miho. "You'll die too," Velcro said. "There aren't enough pods for everyone." "I know," Miho replied. "That's why we're taking your command shuttle." Kato had already overridden the shuttle bay doors. Miho and the freed prisoners ran through the chaos of the evacuating ship. The dragons cleared their path and no one was brave enough to stop them. They reached the shuttle bay and crowded into Velcro's personal ship. It was large enough for everyone, including 3 dragons who barely fit in the cargo hold. Kato piloted them away from the prison ship. Behind them, they watched as the massive vessel began breaking apart. Escape pods scattered in all directions like seeds in the wind. Then the engines exploded in a brilliant flash of white light. The prison ship that had held thousands of innocent prisoners was gone. For several days they traveled to the nearest neutral space station. Word of the breakout spread faster than their ship could fly. Every news network in the galaxy carried the story. Footage from the prison's security cameras showed everything. Miho taming the dragons. The battle through the corridors. The final escape. When they finally docked at the station, they found dozens of ships waiting. Some were human vessels coming to help. Others were from species who had lost members to Velcro's prison. They all wanted to meet the man who had done the impossible. Miho stood at the shuttle's exit ramp with Baram beside him. The dragon's massive head reached down and Miho placed his hand on its scarred snout, just like he had that first day in the pit. A reporter pushed through the crowd holding a recording device. "Captain Park Miho. The whole galaxy wants to know. How did you survive? How did you tame creatures that no one has ever controlled before?" Miho was quiet for a moment, looking at Baram, then at Hanul and Bada behind him. "They threw me in a cell with dragons thinking it would kill me," he finally said. "They forgot that humans have been turning wolves into loyal dogs for thousands of years. We've been making friends with dangerous creatures since the beginning of our history. We don't need claws or armor or venom. We have something better. We have the ability to connect, to understand, to lead." He looked directly at the camera. "They wanted to know what makes humans dangerous. It's not our strength or our weapons. It's that we never stop adapting. We turn every situation into an advantage. We make allies where others see only enemies. That's what makes us survivors. That's what makes us human." The crowd erupted in cheers. Not just humans but aliens from dozens of species who had heard the story and understood its meaning. Miho smiled slightly and walked down the ramp with 3 dragons following behind him like loyal hounds. The legend of the human beast tamer had begun. And across the galaxy, in military academies and strategic planning rooms, a new rule was added to the handbooks about humans. Never underestimate them. Never trap them. And never ever make them angry. Because humans don't just survive. They conquer.